Welcome to the Navigating Solo podcast, a dedicated platform where we explore the unique needs and concerns of solo aging with a focus on empowerment, connection, and proactive planning. I'm your host, Aileen Gerhardt, and today I am thrilled to welcome our guest, Jay Zigmont. Jay holds a PhD, an MBA, and is a certified financial planner and is the founder of Child Free Wealth, a life and financial planning firm dedicated to helping child free and permanently childless people. Child Free Wealth is the first and currently the only life and financial planning firm dedicated to serving child free people. Dr. J is a certified financial planner, child free wealth specialist, and author of the forthcoming book, The Child Free Guide to Life and Money, which actually will be available at the end of December. Dr. J is the co host of the Child Free Wealth podcast. His PhD is in adult learning from the University of Connecticut. He has been featured in Fortune, Forbes, MarketWatch, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, Business Insider, CNBC, and many other publications. Jay, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Thanks for having me. Anytime I can be talking about these issues, I love. And you're on the right path. The soloist question is a hard one to answer.
Great. Hopefully, our listeners will have some really good starting and launching points as they listen or watch our conversation today. To get started, could you share a bit about your work as a certified financial planner? For some, this may be the first time they hear about that credential, and typically who you help.
Yeah. When I was studying to become a CFP, the interesting thing to me is there's never once a mention of the concept of living a life without kids.
Mm,
My wife and I are child free, but like everything assumes you're going to get married, you're going to have kids. That's just the life you're going to live. And to me, that was like, I don't know. I was wrong. I was like, wait, we're living a different life. Aren't there other people? And come to find out, about 25% of the U.S. are child free, meaning they don't have kids and never planning on kids. But just about all the financial planning advice out there assumes you're going to have kids and also assumes you're going to be married. And it means it's bad advice for a lot of people. So my research has really been around the question about like, how does it change when you're child free, when you're solo, all the other components? About 32% of childless folks will never marry, as opposed to 2.5% of parents. So it's a huge percentage. There's just these assumptions built into the system that actually can harm us.
mm.
So that's where we've been looking at and saying, all right, how does that change your life plan, your estate plan, financial plan, your taxes, all of that? And it's one of those areas where, I'll be frank, we're making up some of this stuff as we go along. I mean, that's one of the new books there. Like, we're creating content that doesn't exist because we break a lot of the standard rules.
How do your colleagues in the discipline, other certified financial planners, are they catching on, quote unquote? Are they seeing where perhaps demographics and statistics and research are pointing in different directions than may have been the quote unquote traditional models of how one approaches helping clients? Has that changed at all?
I'd love to say it has, but it really hasn't. I mean, I spend half my time talking to child-free folks about their finances and the other half talking to financial people about child-free folks. And we just actually came back from 2 conferences and talking about it. And unfortunately, there's a lot of negative stigma around child-free. There's a
Mm,
lot of politics around other things. So where people are like, nope, I'm just not going to deal with it. We do have some of our peers that are getting into it. So for example, one of my colleagues, she does 100% of her work. She does on people who live in tiny houses, which, believe it or not, will be child-free people. A lot
right,
of them, or there's a lot of single folks.
right.
So there's that crossover. But it's a challenge when you pick a group that is, let's be real. We're currently in the end of a political season, the childless cat lady routine. I
Right.
mean, I got to call it out. Like, when that's the judgment out there, that's why people in the financial are like, yeah, I don't want to deal with that. Well,
Right.
like, that's why we need to. We need to figure out. But what we need to remember is a lot of the finance systems, the government systems, have built in biases that hurt us. I had a client, she just joined us. And one of the questions we ask is if you're going to work with a financial planner, ask them how your plan is different because you're child free. And she went to her current planner and said, hey, how is it different because I'm child free? And his answer was, I have other child free clients. I'm like, that didn't really answer it. That's like a racist saying, hey, I have friends of X race. No,
Right.
I really would love if we're all accepted. And I really want hundreds of other financial firms to be out there doing this. But it just challenges their way of thinking way too much. It's is what it is.
The great news is, one, you're thinking about it, and two, you've thought about it in a way that not only are you effectively working with clients, but you've done your own research from the ground up, that piece of affecting change from the ground up. You've done your own research, and the result of all of that data has been your upcoming book, The Child-Free Guide to Life and Money, which has a little bit more of a tagline to it, of course, and but that covers a range of topics which will only be incredibly useful to people in general as they age, specifically to soloists, child-free folks, etc. Are there some key financial insights or strategies that in compiling the book, in the hard work of writing the book, you think that soloists, child-free, however people self-identify, with whatever those letters are, that they need to know?
I think one of the things you're going to find in the book is we start with figuring out what your life is first, what your life plan, what you want it to be, and then figuring out your finances, which sounds like a simple change, but it's not. So when you look at the soloist life, what are the questions I'll ask clients? And this is a little dark, but go with me for a second, is what do you want the second line of your obituary to be? The first
Mm.
line is died at X age at whatever your location. The second line is usually like mother of three leaves behind in a list of people. For those of us that don't have a genetic legacy, we're living the soul's life in this example. The question is, what do you want your impact to be? What do you want the U-shaped hole to be when you leave? And it's one of those questions that if you think about it, it comes with a good answer. It doesn't have to be permanent, but what do you want to be? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Then you could shift your finances to fit it. So for example, if you don't have next of kin, most folks don't have a priority in how much money they're going to give to the next generation.
Mm.
For my wife and I, our nephews get what's left over, but if they get like 10 grand or 100 grand, that's fine. But if they get like $1 million, I made a mistake. Because the reality check is we have charities we like, we have things we want to do with our life.
Mm.
And we would have been better off helping our nephews throughout their life than we're 90 and they're 60 and they don't really need the money.
Mm.
But these assumptions and people are worried, what if I run out of money? But it changes all of these things because we have different priorities, different goals. So let me turn the question around to you. Have you ever thought about what that second line of your obituary is?
Yes, and not only have I, but I think in terms of shaking up systems, I think about that in terms of advanced care planning. I'll answer the question directly, but the presumption with advanced care planning is I have to designate a healthcare proxy first and then do all of the other stuff. And my approach in working with clients is you need to do your own homework and figure out what your wants are and what your don't wants are, and then document that, and then designate, and then discuss those that shift. And so that second line of the obituary, which aligns with that shifting in thinking. So for me, as someone who is child free and identifies as a solo ager in a lot of ways, I'm very fortunate to be a very proud aunt, and to have thought about how I participate in my niece and nephew's lives now. And of course, how I can benefit their lives as they age and as part of my legacy. But also, what are the other pieces in my community, in my greater national community that could also benefit, that may not be thought of in the same way for all financial planners in terms of thinking about beneficiaries.
Mhm.
And so I think it's an excellent question, and I hope people really have hit pause and gone back to listen to that, your question and your approach again, because I think it's incredibly informative and a really great instructive tool for then how you go about planning. You shift the launching point. Is there more you want to say about that?
Absolutely. And look at it this way. If you don't want to pass on a whole bunch of money when you die, you might be able to change your career path where you can cut back on work. You can do work you enjoy. People like want to go back and be librarian. I don't know why. Awesome job, sure, but it doesn't pay a lot of. But
Right.
I can do that by goal to have a whole lot of money at the end. And these are the things people don't think about. My question is always, and I say tongue in cheek, is what do you want to be when you grow up? And I don't care what age you are. What do you want? And what you realize, if you get to midlife ish, and you're like, I can follow the path I'm on. Do I really want to do that for 40 years of my life?
Mhm.
What matters to me? What makes me happy? What brings me joy? In the book, we're talking about how we simplify our finances so your life could be amazing. But what does amazing mean to you? I have clients that like amazing means they have the best garden in the world. I have other people that amazing means they're traveling the world. I don't care. But it's up to you what you enjoy. But your
Right.
money, your time, your effort needs to go to that. And I think that's just that mind shift that's different from, oh, you got to save your money, you got to retire, you got to do all this stuff, that's the money generation. That are just assumptions that don't fit us. And if those
Mhm.
assumptions don't fit, the financial plans don't fit, and it just starts rolling backwards.
Sometimes people have a aha moment or a and that causes someone to look at, for example, the second line of an obituary differently. Was there something specifically for you personally or professionally that helped that possibly shifted that model, especially as you were exploring the CFP credential?
Yes, I talk about it as what I call the child-free midlife crisis, which is you hit your personal, professional, financial goals, and then you're like, now what? And if you have kids, parents put their goals onto their kids. Now, it's a separate discussion whether that's a good or bad idea, but that's what they put.
Right.
And I hit it. I was actually, my wife and I, we embraced out of Garden of Rose. We take turns of who's providing support and who's growing. I was providing a support role. I was actually running a maple syrup farm. It was fun, but I hit my professional goals. And what next? I don't really need more money. I mean, it'd be nice to have more money, but I don't really need it. I've like gone up the career ladder. All that. I'm like, what do I want to do? And it was interesting. I remember the moment I was actually out on a tractor in the farm and I got noticed that someone that I went to high school with had died of cancer.
Mm.
And this is my early 40s. And like the first time, like somebody in your high school
Mm.
class dies, and that's like, you're like, oh, then you have to at least pause.
Mhm.
This is something I knew, but we hadn't talked in a while, but what am I doing with my life? And I'm a very goal driven person. What I realized was that necessarily have big goals for myself, but I could spend my time helping others to reach their goals. And once you realize that, okay, how do I do that? My background's in education, coaching, financial planning, all of that's coaching, like that fits well. I grew up with broke. I didn't grow up with money. I am not a finance guy by nature. I saw a whole bunch of people that need help in what do they want to do in their life and what do they do with their finances? How do I get around it? How do I get past the system and all this stuff? I'm like, okay, I'll spend the rest of my life helping people get to their goals. It's interesting because you start realizing you can touch people's lives and maybe there's a different measure. The measure is not for me like how much money's in the bank, but like how many lives touched and how many people I've helped. And I think that's a shift that changes just about everything about you.
I think that's a fabulous perspective as well. And I know so many people have benefited from your perspective that way, personally and professionally. When people are setting up their plans, hopefully in a way that they've shifted that mindset of what that starting point is, are there specific options or considerations you feel that people really should keep in mind as they work on setting up those plans?
So the key is to make sure your plan matches your goals, not somebody else's. So let me give you an example. A lot of child-free folks move regularly. They're not tied down to one particular area, whether it's family or school or whatever they have to do, but they're traveling, they're moving. Who move every 2, 3, 4 years. Buy a house is not a great idea.
Mm.
But everybody says you must buy a house. That's where I'm going to age in place. Or I'm like, but there are other options. And what happens is we're just brainwashed to follow what we call the standard light strip. It says you go to school, you get married, you have all this. This is what you do. It's just part of what you do. And I'm like, does it make you happy? So I was talking to somebody, and she bought a house because that's what she was expected to do, and hated all the work that came with it, and like dealing with everything that broke. And like, I'm like, how would you rent? They'd be like, I'd love to. I'm like, cool, let's sell the house. Like, which sounds like on the surface, not a great financial answer, but it actually is. And it works for people living that life. It's all these things that change it. Like, for example, if you're a soloist, your need for life insurance is pretty minimal.
Mm.
I'd rather you worry about your disability insurance and your long-term care insurance than your life insurance. Do go, but I need somebody to pay for my burial. Guess what? Life insurance does not pay for your burial. Gosh. That
Right.
pay comes 6 months later. And
Right.
that's what's happening is we just have these like scripts in our head. And I'm just putting with clients, I'm like, okay, who's voiced in your head so you got to do that? They're like, oh, that's my dad taught me, my mom taught me, that's what I've read online. I'm like, cool. None of those people are living your life. You need your finances and your life to match you. And one of the things that happens in particular with soloists is this fear about, I don't want to run out of money. I don't want to be destitute. I don't want to be living on the street. I don't want to like. The hard part is at some point, just getting more money is not going to make you feel safer. You have to shift the way you think about money, your money mindsets, the way you look at finances. About 80% of your success with money is your own mental models, your own behaviors, and just getting more money is going to make you feel safer. We need to figure out a structure to make you feel safe, which might include finances, might include insurance, might include health, might whatever it is. But you need to feel comfortable with it and understand it. And they're like, but online it says I need to have X amount of money to retire or do. I'm like, okay, somebody picked a number out of the air, or it's an average for the whole country. It doesn't match you. And that's where people are like, oh, what should I do? I'm like, we got to figure out what do you want to be, where do you want to go, what do you want? And then we can work our way backwards.
I think the notion of people are not handed a manual for how one approaches aging, or the financial literacy piece, the health literacy piece, all of the pieces, how they interact, and shaking up just that initial mindset, the notion of, if I own property, I'm this. If I rent property, I'm that. Like all of those, I've hit those milestones. I haven't. I am or I am not. And so being able to really have those conversations, which I have a feeling happens less frequently than would be desirable. This notion of, this is the key, this is the model we use to financial planning. We now have longer lifespans. Therefore, I, of course, don't want to run out of money in the end. And that is not anything anyone is suggesting, but the how and the why and the what and the choices along the way can inform that in a way that I don't think anyone is, that enough people, I won't say anyone, because you and I are having this conversation and you probably think about this many minutes and hours of the day, as I do about solo aging in general. And I don't think enough people are having those conversations. What are clients' reactions when you say, let's shift that mindset? Let's think about this. What's the messaging going on with rent versus, as opposed to owning versus, sounds like it's a competition and it's not. The notion of one or the other. What are clients' initial responses to that?
I think what tends to happen is we have a lot of, I call head trash going on. It's like self-limiting beliefs. I got to do this. I got to do that. Or if I do this, that will happen. And I'll spend 20 minutes, people pull apart going, okay, I'll look at your finances. You're going to be fine. And they're like, I don't believe you because. And I'm like, okay, let's go through the because. We can do scenarios, we can run simulations. I can do all that. What's your big worries? Let's insure those if we have to. Let's figure out a solution. There's a way to handle it. And people are like, but I've been worrying about this my entire life. And we're comfortable worrying
Yes.
about it.
Right.
And it's a maladaptive behavior. And one of my colleagues says it this way. Eventually, you have to look at that maladaptive behavior and say, thank you for getting me to here. I've got it from here. I'm going to go in a different direction than where I've been and be happy with me in my life and my money. And I think that's hard because there's a lot of baggage come to that. I joke about it and I say, I talk about two taboo topics at once, being child free and being wealthy. And it shouldn't be a taboo. We should be able to talk to our friends about what are you doing? Do we want to do something together? Like the Golden Girls homes, the alternative living. Do we want to support each other? Are you struggling? How are you doing? But we just have all this baggage and like finance becomes this like dirty word that we can't talk about. The soloist, the challenge is, yes, it's expensive to be solo. It costs you between $400,000 and $1 million across your life in what we call the single tax. It's not
Mm,
actually a literal tax, like you can't
right.
share houses and all that. So yeah, it's expensive. But at the same time, soloists had built great skills to be self-reliant. That self-reliance can go a little too far. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to reach out to professionals and say, hey, through your eyes, what do you see? When I look at somebody's money, I'm looking at it unemotionally. And that's actually a benefit. Because like, you're like, oh, I inherited this from that, and that money's not counted here. And this money doesn't get counted, like, and this is for that. And I'm like, let's look at your overall plan. Let's look at your goal. Let's figure it out. People are like, oh, I never thought of it that way. And that's where a professional can help and get you over those humps.
I think another piece for solos, building on that taboo of not discussing money and not feeling that comfortability and the need to change that. And then people also have to designate financial powers of attorney as another safety measure in a similar vein to a healthcare proxy, both of whom would be in place, those pieces. We hope we'll never need them. We put them in a corner and they collect dust, but they have to be informed decisions. Do clients talk to you about that, financial powers of attorney, in terms of that piece as well? And how do they look at it? And what kinds of barriers might they come built in?
This is my nightmare. So before we go there, let me ask you a question.
Great.
Oh no, I'm just being transparent. Like I get the question, like, who's going to take care of you when you're older? I'm like, the
Right,
financial
right.
stuff's the easy stuff, like long-term care insurance. Like
Right.
I can do that in my sleep. I got math for
Right.
that.
Right.
But let me ask you this question. So you do the healthcare advocate work. Are you willing to be somebody's medical power of attorney in any state in the country?
So I can't be due to the ethics of my board certified credential, which is an answer that many disciplines have. And I presume for the CFP, it's the same thing. Now, I can be a bridge, meaning that, and this most likely sounds familiar, in that I am able to closely know the client and closely know their wants and don't wants and have a relationship with their proxy, their alternate, their support
Mhm.
network. But because I am in the role of helping people identify reliable information to make an informed decision, I can't be on the carrying out of decisions end, which of course then creates, as somebody with a focus on working with folks who I identify as solo agers, solos, etc., just further creates that gap. I'm not an answer in that professional way, other than the how you figure it out part. Do you have a similar experience?
So this is the question I've actually spent 3 years working on, which is the question is who for child-free people is your medical power of attorney, your financial power of attorney, and your executor? And they have to be able to help you across multiple states.
Mm.
So one of the issues is you get to like California and Arizona, you can hire a professional.
Uh,
But in other states, I'm sorry, but he's my language. You're screwed. I found one
right.
attorney in Georgia that'll do it. Occasionally, trust companies will do it for you, but they'll
Hmm.
only do it for you like millions and millions of dollars. And unless you have an answer, because I've been asking this to everybody, I have not found a solution that works across the country.
Right, which in 2024 is absurd. I mean, so we can call a spade there. Some elder law attorney practices licensed in their own state will be able to serve in both capacities. They will sign on as both proxy and financial POA. However, I often suggest to clients that you bring in CFP, you bring in a healthcare advocate to enhance that team so that you have the other pieces of the asking questions and perspectives and all of that. I joke far too often about fiduciary envy with California and Arizona, and the fact that is an excellent answer. And when we look at this issue, but there is not, especially nationwide, right? The licensing state-wise, since I've unearthed your nightmare, and I'm very sorry about that, especially in the middle of the day, you felt you've been led on breadcrumbs that maybe you have some more answers?
So, couple things. When I say this is a nightmare, like I have clients that we tried in multiple states, like in Texas, none of the attorneys would do the medical. Just that's it. Nobody. And I mean, we talked to every attorney, but like we went through a lot of them. Like we found nobody, and like their legal board was like, yeah, we're not doing that. And so even some states forget it. And if you have a good solution in California, but then you move to Nevada, forget it. Like, your plan's no good. Also, your California person may or may not be able or willing to help you when you're traveling across the country.
Right.
There's a bunch of issues. So I went out and we actually paid a team of legal interns the first summer to research this. I've spent more money on lawyers than I want to admit. I've talked to every company I can think of, every trust company, all that. And we have a couple problems. One of the problems is because child-free folks truly want to die with zero, not have a lot of money, there's not a great market for it. The trust companies will do it if you got $15 million.
Right.
But if you're going to end up on Social Security and Medicaid, yeah, they're like, yeah, we don't talk to you. And if you run out of money, how do you pay for that healthcare advocate? How do you pay for that power to? It's a big issue.
Right.
I ended up partnering with a company. I'm actually on the board. We're forming a trust company in order to be able to do this for child-free people. And this is something that'll be out middle of next year. We're building something we call the Child-Free Trust. And we will be able to serve as people's medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, executor, and trustee across the country.
Wow.
Yep. And it's really cool. Actually, we just filed for a patent on it. So we're doing a bunch of work on this. But banking regulators haven't seen a new idea in 100 years. Trust companies have historically served as conservators and guardians, and that's part of their role. But how do we do it? And in this structure, we're going to charge a monthly fee to keep information up to date. Because one of the problems is people's information changes every week. The way I say it is, if my wife had to get a car crash, who makes our medical decisions? Who makes our financial decisions? And who makes sure our dog is let out?
Exactly.
Which sounds stupid, but that is
No, not at all. And it's a question that people don't consider. So I always say to people, in your emergency planning, one, your healthcare proxy, think about a HIPAA release as much as you think about a healthcare proxy. That's just me. But two, who will care for the pet? What's the pet's name? What's the plan, et cetera? And I have some clients who have actually gone as far as financial planning for pets should the pet outlive the client. And I think that's incredibly clever as well. But also, who will take in your mail if there's an accident? Who will make sure your refrigerator doesn't have moldy whatever, crumbs on the counter, whatever it is? Those pieces, those are not historically asked estate planning questions, because we have to think about the everyday as much as we think about, of course, the long-term planning. There are a few agencies in different states who have a focus on being a healthcare proxy for someone, et cetera, but are bound by that state piece or the state licensing boundary or whatever. So being able to learn more about that as it comes into true fruition with the patent coming through and all of the red tape and other hoops you get to jump through, hopefully for its arrival in mid-2025, I think would also be an outstanding conversation to have further. And I think that those solutions from the ground up, if we wait for them to come through systems, we will be waiting an extraordinarily long time. I'm well aware that the baby boomer generation, a quarter of them didn't have children. And the baby boomer generation has been a demographic that the models have shifted for as they have grown. They needed more trailers for elementary school to house the number of students and all of that. And yet, knowing that from the time they arrived, these pieces, these solutions, these whatevers were not baked in as our demographic changes. It again speaks to the value of from the ground up.
Yeah, and you're on the right page. And by the way, I mean, look, let's be transparent. I'm putting a boatload of money into this, a boatload
Right.
of time into this. This is not, a small idea. But the reason I'm doing that is because there's such a big need. Because let's be real, the numbers I had, and let's see if you have different numbers, but the ones I use from a research standpoint, about 25% of the U.S. is child free. About 32% of those will never marry. So
Mhm.
so it's about 32%. And the interesting stat I found, and this is what I've been trying to dive into deeper, is about 25% of the US are disenfranchised from their family. And so really what that means is we take 25% of people child free, so they got no next of kin that way. They're single, they got no partner for that,
Right.
and they don't have family. Now they go, I'm going to go rely on my friends. That friend system works except for the last person in the friend system. And we all tend to be about the same age. We're going to do a Golden Girls setup. It's fine for me if I'm the first one. But like the last one to go is out of luck. When you look at it and say, okay, 25% of folks are disenfranchised from their family, it matches about the number, about 20% live nowhere near their family. Again, you got all these huge numbers of soloists. You're talking about millions and millions of people that don't have it. And if you actually look at the stats, about 58% of the US do not have any estate planning documents.
Hmm.
And I think part of that is I got no answer. I'm blam. But my big area is for the child free people, I have them doing their estate planning at 20 if I see it.
Hmm.
I don't care when. Because I'm like, look, if you don't appoint somebody to make decisions for you, the state is making decisions for you, or the healthcare systems are. I don't trust the them. I don't care what state you're in. Maybe the good system.
And they don't know you enough to know that it may be what you want or not want.
I
Right.
mean, we're talking about millions and millions of
Hmm.
people that there's not really a solution. Because you and I just went through it, some state by state stuff. If you
Hmm.
cross, it's a disaster. And somebody said to me, I was on a podcast, and they're like, should we fix the system? I'm like, absolutely. Let's be real. We're in a world where they're judging childless cat ladies. The likelihood that they're going to fit laws for us is zero.
The good news is there is increased visibility about the unique needs and concerns of people who are child free, who self identify, again, whatever term they want to use, soloist, solo ager, child free, etc. And I know they're not all exactly the same thing. Language is language, but there has been increased visibility, which is a good thing. The challenge, of course, is the solutions piece. We can keep pointing out what the challenges are. We need to be able to offer more and more solutions. That framework around solo aging, child free, that notion that someone didn't have kids, may or may not be partnered, because unless someone has figured out immortality, just like in the friends group, a partner will more likely outlive another partner. Then you have people may or may not live alone. And then you have people who, for a variety of what you just pointed out with family dynamics, geography, inability, or unwillingness to assist or have their own plan, etc. That leaves a very, as you just very astutely pointed out, a very large component of the population trying to figure out planning. And as human beings, when something is hard, we like to procrastinate because it's hard and we don't have answers, or I don't know who to ask, or I don't know how to find reliable information. We make the joke about please don't diagnose yourself through an AI or through a internet search, please. But what's the in between? Thinking in big ways and being able to deliver things like answering those questions state by state. There are in some places volunteer health proxy programs. And that, for anyone listening, does not mean you bumped into someone in the grocery store and they volunteer. They are trained through the state. It is a trained, informed program. It is not just random people call up and say, oh, sure, I'll be someone's health proxy. But again, singular, confined, what happens when you travel, what happens when you move, all of those pieces. And so solutions are always excellent. If there is a blurb at all, even with the caveat that coming soon or hoping to land soon, I will make sure to put in the show notes with that what we just talked about in terms of that trust. I think that will be helpful to many as well.
And if I can give you one more thing, I think I had a reporter from the Wall Street Journal reach out to me about this topic. And he said, how about just like leaving your nephew a whole bunch of money to take care of this for you? And I said to her, I said, do you realize you just set up an opportunity for elder fraud or elder abuse?
Right.
Because the reality check is if they're getting all your estate,
Right.
they're going to go, well, she's going in the cheapest home we can find because that's my money going away. And you can believe your nephew's not going to do that to you.
Right.
Look at the ARP stats on elder abuse.
Right.
It's amazing to me how often that's happening.
And it's also an unfair thing, even if financials are the incentive, that nephew, that niece, that cousin, that whomever, that's a big ask. You still have to do all the planning. One would hope one would do the wants and don't wants, all of that planning, and be an active participant, even if that financial piece is the incentive. I agree that is not both in the aspect of elder abuse in general, that notion of financial incentive, pieces of understanding someone's wants and nots financially, health-wise, etc. And also that presumes there is a generation that nephew, niece, cousin, whoever is interested in the gig, even if there's a financial incentive. That's a fascinating question. And was the journalist open to your response of, here are all the things to think about that question?
I don't know. The article ended up with like one line in, and a lot of these other discussions worth it.
On the cutting room floor, I can understand.
It's just funny side note. I do a lot of press, and I was talking some of the finance. I think it was Roth conversions or something. And I said, hey, I always want to pitch. If you have any interest, I'd love to talk about child-free finances and something other. And this reporter says to me, he says, I don't think we can use the word child-free in print. What do you mean? And that was a big press thing. You would recognize the name. And then he said, oh, it's like the word suicide. We're worried if we put it in print, people will do it. I'm like, huh?
I don't even, after you were done with all the cartoonish things above your head, what was your...
So he actually went to his editor to find the answer. And in the end, the editor was like, okay, we can use the word. But I'm like, this is the bias. I mean, I went to advertise my book on Amazon. It's called The Child Free Guide to Life Money. So it has the word child free in it. And the first 2 times I went to put the ad in, the system denied it and said, that's a personal issue that we're not willing to advertise, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, that's what I'm facing here. I can't even get people to use the word, never mind have a good conversation.
Right. And what does that say about customers who may want to feel and deserve to feel seen by using that as a search term? The other side of it is, I'm not seen. For every website that says we can help you and your loved ones as default language in some kind of business website, and there are many of them across many disciplines, if you don't feel you see yourself on the screen, what capacity will they have to support my needs and understand my needs? That's all incredibly fascinating in not necessarily positive ways, but incredibly fascinating as well. I think we are definitely like-minded in thinking about things in terms of this general slice of the demographic, which is only increasing, and trying to find solutions, collaborations, the notion of knowing, for me as a healthcare advocate, knowing attorneys, knowing certified financial planners, knowing care managers and researchers across the country. I'm based in Massachusetts. One, I'm fortunate to work with people all over the country, but two, to be able to understand and learn from and with each other, I think is just the the ideal approach, which will only have the best outcomes for clients as well. So, are there any pieces around before we shift a little to a couple quick personal insights? Are there any pieces you feel like you really, in the various ways you've talked about things, you feel like we've skipped over and you really want to make sure you highlight in some way?
I think if I could highlight one thing, it's if you're going to work with a financial professional, ask them how your plan is different because you're a soloist, you're child free, whatever term you want to use. And what you're going to find is a couple different things. One they might say, oh, it's not different. If that's the case, just walk out.
Cross them off.
Or they'll say, I always love this one. You'll change your mind. Oh, that one gets too fired up. No, like that's not a choice. If they say, I don't know, let's figure it out, I might be okay with that answer. But it's the question of finding people that serve people like you. And we attracted about a third of our introductory meetings with our clients end up in tears. We're like, why? Are we doing something wrong? What's going on? And we asked them, and the answer was it was the first time they felt heard and seen, which is exactly what you just said. And
How could your meeting not end up in tears? The professionals are in tears on the other end too.
I think the hard part is like we're working with marketing and trying to figure out like, people don't even know to search for child-free
Right.
finance or whatever. We can't name our company. People who don't have kids and aren't planning on having kids, well, it just wouldn't work for a domain name. But I think it's hard to say, hey, there are people out there that specialize in serving soloists and serving child-free couples and serving that understand you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so important because, they gotta, the first chapter of my book is, are we weird? And the answer is no. We're weird within the child-free world. We're weird within the general population. And living a solo life might seem different in the general population. But solo is a big chunk of my client. I mean, it's just what we do. You're very normal. I've seen your story before. I know what's going to happen. I know
Right.
what your concerns are. And that's where you're like, oh, you get it. Well, yeah. But I've talked to other people that don't. I'm like, you're right. I'm trying to teach them, but like, they're not realistic always.
And I find I'm remarkably human in the ability to touch every single person in the country. I think that having those conversations, reminding people why search terms should be quote unquote allowed, even that concept is enraging in so many ways. And not being able to immediately, from the proprietor sense, not being able to see the other side, which is you're telling your customers you don't want to see or hear them, and they're not a value to you possibly in the same way as other consumers. No one, of course, wants to be told that, and no business wants most likely to intentionally do that. I think that question around how are you different and feeling confident in the ability to ask the question. It's not a gotcha question. It's truly, am I the right client fit for you and you for me? It's not personal. It's not a personal question.
I mean, if you come to me and you've got 5 kids, you're married, blah, blah, I'm going to send you one of my peers, she runs a firm called The Wealthy Parent. I'm going to send you there. It's not that I don't like you. I will serve you if you want to sign up. I'm not going to turn you away. I'm not going to but I don't know that life. And my financial plans don't reflect that. And that's where it's people are like, oh, I've had people all the time. You're discriminating against people with kids. I'm like, no, don't listen. Kelly, she runs Wealthy Carry. Send me there.
See if that company or another company is equally a good fit, or if you feel a better fit, or what. Like, it has to fit, right? That's not every client that approaches us as business people, as in the work we do, are the right fit for us either. But again, in that those adulting classes no one was ever offered, we're not able to, we don't come from that approach. In all of the nightmares and all of the thinking and all of the really innovative ways that you're approaching things, and I'm only thinking about how many different impacts and opportunities people will have hearing this conversation. In your own personal life, is there a talent or a skill that, in all the thinking and all the whatever, that if you were instantly able to master magically, would be something that you can think of? And if so, what would it be and why?
So if I can pick one, unfortunately, right now, my issue, my reading list, I have a stack on books over here that is way too high. I want to be one of those people that can flip in the book and read the whole book in like minutes and get it. I am not. I got to think about it. I got to work through it. So I guess that's speed reading. I guess
Mm.
is what, as long as I can actually understand. The problem for me is I'll get like 6 sentences and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, how does that impact this? And my
You have
ADD
a
starts acting up
retention.
and
You're having a conversation with the periodical as opposed to, I think that's great. That whole once through process. Are there particular pieces of advice, again, as you've approached things, navigating your own life in general and then professionally, that have stuck with you over time?
I follow a kind of a simple saying that Zig Ziglar made popular, which was,
Uh,
you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. And what I love about that is it is about service, it is about helping others, but it still means you can take care of yourself.
mhm,
The reality check is you still got to pay your bills. You just still got to do your thing. I run a company, we got to pay the bills. But we start with, how do we help folks? And once you embrace that as an approach, the rest will follow through because people get worried about, how am I going to your profit? How am I do-" You help enough people, the money will follow. Like, it truly does work. But I think,
mhm.
fortunately, as a society, we've gotten away from that a bit more than I'd like. And I mean, I'll be real, I can make a whole lot more money doing some other things than I do now, but I wouldn't have the right place for my soul. I wouldn't feel like I'm helping people. I mean, every morning that's where I start with, okay, how do I help folks? Now, I'll tell you, my staff often yell at me because I go too far. Like, you'll do anything for your clients. I'm like, yes, I will. They're like, there's a limit. I'm like, probably there should be, but like,
Right.
I'm good at that. But that's just how I'm wired.
Mhm.
Any of my team members need me, any of my clients need me, I'm going to bend over backwards to help them. I guess that's the balancing act. Maybe that's the negative side, but it's worked for me so far.
Mhm. And to feel fulfilled is an important piece as well. That satisfaction and fulfillment. I think many in helping professions, sometimes I joke, I have bleeding heart syndrome, all of those pieces, that when you become a trusted individual to a client or someone who has benefited from a talk you've given or whatever, then you want to continue to help and support them however you can. I, as somebody afflicted with the same mindset, completely agree and do not think it's a bad thing. I'm sure there are others who probably say there's a whole conversation to be had about balance, and that's a totally different conversation. We've covered so much. I am so grateful for your time and the conversation. For our listeners, you can definitely, without a doubt, find out more about Dr. J, his work, and the upcoming book, which has its own part of the website, The Child Free Guide to Life and Money, being released at the end of December, which is very exciting. Pre-orders are already available. I noticed that on the website as well. The website is childfreewealth.com. It would be a funny conversation to see what about buying that domain when the whole proprietor of advertising the book concept. Again, that's childfreewealth.com. All of Jay's information will not only be available in show notes, but on the video version when we upload it to YouTube. I put in a contact slide as well with all the information. There's a very nice graphic available for the book cover itself. So we'll make sure to include that. And I know people will just sight unseen, and I was fortunate to be able to have a digital preview of the book as well, and it is so informative and so well done, and I know it'll be a benefit to people as they acquire it. So thank you for that, and thank you for everyone who's tuned in to today's episode of the Navigating Solo podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any questions or topic suggestions, you can email us at podcast@navigatingsolo.com. All of Dr. J's contact information will, of course, be available, as I said, through the show notes and also on the slide. Is there a quick email you'd like to include as well?
That's on all the socials at Choppy. That's the best way.
Excellent. So until next time, stay empowered and stay connected. I'm your host, Aileen Gerhardt, and this is the Navigating Solo podcast.